Alright, at this point, I'm sure I speak for a lot of people about the complete slap in the face of an ending the original Seed Destiny was. A majority of the fan base already knows how rushed the final battle was just a shithole. The Destiny doesn't get a grandiose rematch against a Strike Freedom as advertised in the magazines, a bunch of reused animation and assets, and a whole lot of plot inconsistencies and BS happening in the last few episodes. But what I think the biggest gripe, according to many fans, was that the characters we followed from the start of the series into the end just simply lost. The Destiny just gets crippled, Legend never does jack shit, and the Strike Freedom just reigns over all. But what if I told you that there's other forms of media out there that take a complete 180 turn on the endings itself? Media in the form of games that creates completely new alternate scenarios of the player actually defeating the three ship alliance, and yes, that includes Kira and even Atherin. Alright, now for the sake of this video, I won't be focusing on any of those crossover games with other franchises or anything like that. That in itself could just be another separate video for a different topic. So, I'm not going to talk about Super Robot Wars or anything like that. I'm going to save that for a different video one day, probably. But today we'll just be looking at the primary games that has Seed Destiny as its main focus. So, the first of many alternate endings we'll be taking a look at is a game that is quite common and well known in the Extreme Versus community. Not only does it serve as one of the predecessors to the Extreme Versus style of gameplay we know today, but it is a game that has the most playable number of units from the Cosmic Era, with Seed Battle Destiny being a close second. Rengo vs. Zaf 2 originally started as an arcade-only game that was released on the 29th of June of 2006 for Japan. It was not until 6 months later that a PS2 port for the game was released, which came with an exclusive game mode called Plus Mode, which serves as the game's de facto story mode. Players take control of Shin Asuka, who serves as this mode's main protagonist, and as such can attempt a magnitude of missions covering both the story of Seed and Seed Destiny's events. The game mode itself seems to have a lot of elements from rom-com style of games, which is very popular at the time, with the player's choices being able to impact several relationships with other NPCs and even influencing their actions, whether if they ally with the player or not. Similar to rom-com scenario games, if the player as Shin were to have max relationship points with many characters, the NPC's dialogue with the player and even portrait will change to reflect the level of points accumulated as the story goes on. Many of the missions are scenarios in the eyes of the NPCs, with Shin, aka the player, assisting the NPCs in said events. Of course, there are some minor differences between the scenarios of the TV anime and the game, but none other than the mission, The Final Power, stands out the most. The mission is obviously the same scenario as the final episode that the mission gets its name from. The dialogue, fight, and even scenery is all lifted from the anime, adapted into the game, but with just one major difference. That, of course, being the player actually taking control of Shin and beating the crap out of both Strike Freedom and the Infinite Justice Gundam. Unlike the anime where Shin and friends lost, a lot of people were pissed about that, the game does a complete 180 by having us, the player, as Shin, being forced to win in order to have access to post-game content. So, upon beating both Atherin and Kira, a special cutscene will be played depicting the Strike Freedom and Infinite Justice crippled and destroyed due to the player's actions. A unique prompt from Durando will then play, congratulating the player, or in this case Shin, for defeating their enemies, and that the Destiny plan will now commence without fail or anyone to stand in their way of Zaf's new regime. In a similar fashion, Dynasty Warriors Reborn also has like a short DLC where Zaf also wins. In this alternate scenario of the final episode, after Atherin destroys the core of the Messiah, Durando quickly repairs it and fires another shot at Orb and Earth, due to him never being killed by Kira in this story, and because of the forces dwindling due to the player's actions. Orb, of course, unconditionally surrenders to Zaph's new military might. As the Destiny plan continues without fail, our protagonists, Lunamaria and Shin, have little doubts on the events that have transpired. Rei, of course, shoots back, saying that the Destiny plan and Durando's words are absolute and will pave way into a new era of peace. As the mission ends, Shin quietly remarks that even if they had second thoughts or wanted a do-over, it's just far too late now to do so anyways. Alright, so for the next game we'll be looking at is Gundam Memories. But before I continue, I know this doesn't have anything to do with the video, but I'm just gonna say it. I hated this game. I hated playing it. It just sucked. The combat was repetitive. You know, I wasn't enjoying it. So bear with me if the gameplay is super bad, but I just hated this game. Like, I'm just gonna say it. It sucks. Alright, with that out of the way, I wasn't planning on adding this one to the list, but technically the player as Shin can actually win against both Kira and Athrun in the final battle. Although it is not required to beat the two, even when you lose the mission, it still counts as it being completed. However, it is very possible to beat both in order to attain more upgrade points for your units. What's weird, or actually funny in a way, is that after you beat the Strike Freedom the first time, Kira will automatically revive right away, which follows a fading white screen into a black monologue that Shin has with Stella, similar to the new type BS scene of the original show. So yes, Kira's Jesus powers are very well displayed in this game. No matter how many times you take him down, he'll always automatically revive. So it is technically impossible to beat him the second time or third time, as the game will just fade away. Alright, now it's time to mention the cream of the crop in this video. Now this game stands out the most from the others on this list, as all the other ones I've mentioned were released quite well after the original airing of the special editions and original anime. Generation of CE, or Generation of Cosmic Era, is kind of an aberration of sorts. The game was in development during the initial air date of the anime, and as such only covered up events of the story into episode 28, Survivors and Sacrifices, with the events of episode 32 and 34, the attack of Berlin with the Destroy Gundam, being considered as an extra scenario and differs a little from the anime. Due to this game being released before the final handful of episodes, there are of course many elements of the game that was different from the anime, and of course certain story aspects were omitted due to the early release of the game. Of course, for example, mobile suits such as the Infinite Justice Gundam, Legend, and even Akatsuki are not present in the story at all. Mu's identity was never revealed to be Neo as well. Even in the final few missions, he still wears a mask and remains an Earth Alliance soldier. The Messiah and Requiem super weapons are also not present or even mentioned at all in the game. Also, as the scripts for the game's multiple endings, I believe that the writers of Seed Destiny actually gave Bandai an outline of a prototype of sorts for the script of the anime's original ending, which is why there are certain plot points in the story of the game that shares similarities with the anime itself. Due to the nature of the game being released before the anime's conclusion, there's been a lot of speculation online from both fans and critics alike that supposedly one of these supposed multiple endings are actually the true ending to the original series itself. I do believe that these claims have substantial evidence, but before I can speak on those claims, let's first go over the many alternate endings of the game itself. There are a total of 6 that, despite the story being technically incomplete, there are 3 plot points the player chooses. Alright, her death is a canon event, it's a fixed point in this game. She can't be saved at all. Second, because of what I said in the first point, similar to the anime, Shin will always remain vengeful of both Logos and to a certain extent Kira and Archangel crew. Shin will always be given Destiny Gundam no matter the circumstances from Durandal. Although if the player chooses, it is possible to have him pilot other mobile suits for missions. So keep in mind that because of what happened to Stella, Shin will always remain angry at Logos and the Earth Alliance. This is an important plot point later for when I explain the endings of this game. And Kira will always pilot the Strike Freedom, regardless if the player beats him while he still piloted the Freedom Gundam or not earlier in the game. Except for one mission where you can actually, kill Kira. Shin still has animosity towards Kira and the 3-ship alliance up into the end of the game, but he can grow to actually forgive them in some of the alternate endings. But in most of the endings, his hate eventually grows with each passing mission, as evident in his dialogue. Alright, now with that out of the way, let's take a look at ending number 1. Similar to episode 33 of the original anime, Durandal gives a speech to the people of both Earth and the planets to delegitimize Logos. Shin and the masses of both Earth and Zaf believe in the truth that Durandal's words hold. The crew of the Minerva then soon receives an order to quickly dispatch and hunt for Jibril and his forces. Before dispatching, Shin is awarded the Destiny Gundam. Fun fact, it is also implied that Shin was promoted to a Faith member, but it's not really confirmed. Anyways, the player is set to battle both the Alliance and the neutral units of the Serpent Tails, Guy Murakumo and Elijah. If the player only beats the Alliance forces instead of Serpent Tail, the Minerva will soon head into space to track down the escaped Jibril. Upon accidentally encountering his battleship, Shin relentlessly and ferociously shorties out and attacks the remaining Alliance forces. If the player manages to beat and destroy Jibril's fleet within 8 turns, Logos will eventually dissolve. However, it seems that some remnants of Logos wish to prolong the war. Durandal soon unleashes his final trump card, the Neo Genesis super weapon. Just like in the anime, Durandal also goes on a tyrannical rampage to eliminate the last remaining remnants of Logos who refuse a peaceful surrender. Durandal claims that the weapon is for self-defense purposes only and advises that the remaining Alliance forces to stand down. Meanwhile, it seems that Durandal's actions have also caused quite a stir in both the Archangel and Zaf. Cagalli and Atherin are both disgusted by the sudden emergence of Neo Genesis, and as such sets out with Kira and crew to destroy the super weapon of Zaf. Meanwhile, Durka learns of Miralia being a crew member of the Archangel and worries about her well-being. There's also a slight bromance moment between the two. Diaka and Izak, they worry about each other, about having to face each other in the final battle again, because Diaka chooses to defect from Zaf's forces, and Izak, he's worried that he has to fight against Atherin and his former comrade again, just like the last war, so he's conflicted. But despite his inner turmoil, he still decides to fight for the plants. Anyways, the final battle is depicted as a 3-way battle between Zaf, the remnants of Logos, and the 3-ship alliance. The setting also takes place near the Alliance Daedalus moonbase, similar to the anime itself. What's also quite unique to mention is that both Atherin and Kira try to persuade Shin to see that Zaf is in the wrong this time. However, due to the aforementioned canon events that I mentioned earlier, Shin is brimming with anger and hate for both sides, and his fighting spirit cannot be tamed. Because of this, he refuses to listen as his overwhelming hate envelops his entire being, which leads to both Atherin and Kira being ultimately killed alongside the Archangel. Neo Genesis finally launches and annihilates the Alliance Daedalus moonbase. The Alliance, accepting defeat, moves out of space, and soon the public opinion and support of Earth shifts towards Durandal's side. As a result, the Earth Alliance experiences economic failures, and power struggles leading to a decline in their forces and government. The world then comes into Zaph's new regime, a new utopia where the fate of the Earth ends in an uneasy situation. A situation where Neo Genesis has always pointed towards the blue planet. Ending 2. Due to Serpentail's interference, Jibril easily escapes into space, and the Minerva faces a delay as the crew heads out to another mass driver from another Zaph base. Upon launching into space, Jibril's forces from the Dallas moon base, you know what, I'm just gonna call it the moon base from now on. It's just a mouthful just to say the full name. Anyway, so the forces of the moon base attempt a blockade around the Minerva and prevent our protagonist from reaching Jibril. Kira appears alongside the Archangel, asking for the Minerva's help. Talia accepts, and the Archangel crew becomes our ally for this mission. Although Shin is still angered by this decision, he seems to be somewhat persuaded by Talia's word that the Archangel and Kira are no longer enemies. Shin begrudgingly accepts and vows that he does not need help from Kira and Freedom, and as such will defeat the enemies alone. After defeating the blockade, it seems that both Kira and Shin seem to be on good terms somewhat, with Shin seemingly to have abandoned his grudge and mellows out a bit. However, it seems that Minerva still failed to persecute Jibril, and because of this, the crew returns back to their home country of the plants to rest and await further orders. Jibril then threatens Zaph by launching nuclear missiles from their moon base onwards towards the capital of the plants and the many colonies. Durandal also readies his ultimate weapon, the Neo Genesis, as a sign of self-defense. Durandal tries to persuade the Alliance to put away their nuclear weapons and surrender, while promising that Zaph will also lay down the Neo Genesis and won't fire, as long as the Alliance comply with Zaph's demands. Logos ultimately refuses and launches the missiles towards the plants. The Minerva is then ordered to dispatch for their final battle at the moon base. The Three Ships Alliance also appears as an official third-party group. It is also interesting to note that because there is no infinite justice in this game, Authorin is seen piloting the original Justice outfitted with the meter unit instead. Anyways, if the player is able to sink Jibril's ship and stop the missiles from hitting, then Ending 2 will play. It goes as such. After defeating Jibril's forces, the Earth Alliance soon retreats and collapses due to the decaying chain of command. Later, the Earth Alliance and the plants once again sign a peace treaty. Kigali is also present and participates in the signing as well. The world then moves towards a true state of true peace. Well, until, seed freedom, but that's a different story. While Ending 3 only happens if the player completely destroys both the Earth Alliance and the Three Ship Alliance. It goes as this. Durandal then fires a Neo Genesis without warning and completely demolishes the Earth Alliance forces. However, Neo Genesis also hits the Earth directly in its path and brings catastrophic results to the blue planet. The Earth Alliance then unconditionally surrenders, but the government of plants also suffers from backlash from both its people and those on Earth for the actions caused by Neo Genesis. Soon, the plant's Supreme Council disbands for its radical behavior. Both the plants and Earth Alliance face a decline of power in their economic endeavors. The Earth then moves into a dark era, where the state of the world becomes one without light, and as such, walks a gloomy path of uncertainty for several hundred of years to come. Ending 4. Now this ending happens if the player fails to destroy all the missiles before they reach the plants, basically when you lose. Anyways, due to the nuclear missiles hitting the plant's homeland and its many space colonies, Durandal is thus killed, and many of the coordinators living on the space colonies are murdered as civilians of war. The remaining forces of the plants then lose morale and declare an unconditional surrender to Jibril. However, being the extremist warmonger he is, he dismisses it and orders the remaining Alliance forces to slaughter the remaining coordinators, and burn down what little the planet's homeland has. The bloodshed-filled conflict and flame of war continues to burn into CE 74. Ending 5. In another alternate scenario, the Minerva is ordered to launch directly into the moon base instead of protecting the planet's homeland for the final battle. En route towards the base, the crew of the Minerva finds the base to be poorly defended. Morgan Chevalier from, the Astray series then shorties out with his gun barrel dagger and informs the Minerva that Logo's true intention is for a nuclear attack heading towards the planet headquarters. Both Shin and Talia are skeptical to believe the Alliance soldier's words, with Shin exclaiming that they can't trust him due to his affiliation with the Alliance. Shin is determined to carry out Durandal's orders and does not believe in Morgan's words. Talia seems to have suspicions as well and doubts about what Morgan may be saying could be true, but ultimately remains reluctant to believe him as well. Talia seemingly agrees with Shin and then orders troops to launch for their final battle against the Alliance forces on the moon. The enemies that stand out the most in this stage is Neil piloting the Chaos while Sting switches to Destroy Gundam. The ending then goes as described. After the victory against the remaining Alliance forces, the Minerva unexpectedly witnesses the Neo Genesis Gamma laser firing out of nowhere towards the Earth. Both Shin and the crew of the Minerva are in shock of what had transpired. The crew then remains silent as they watch the rings of flames engulf the emptiness of space. Looking down at the blue planet that has lost its color, Shin wonders if what he did was right. Alright, now it's time for the final ending. Ending 6, which seems to be the most unique choice in my eyes in terms of all the endings. In this ending path, while the Archangel is heading towards Orb to deliver Kigali back to her homeland, the Minerva is suddenly given the orders to shoot down the Archangel and his crew on sight. After a long battle, Kira, Kigali, and the crew of the Archangel are killed. That's right, permanently. They don't come back, and there's no Jesus Kira Yamato moment happening. They're dead in this ending. Afterwards, the next mission has the player escort Mir back into the planet's homeland. After a concert, while in space, the mission seems to be going fine until the real Lacus appears, commanding the Eternal alongside the Kusanagi. Lacus seems to be in a state of frustration for the appearance of Mir and the death of her allies in previous mission. It seems that the former pop star artist wants to execute Mir for impersonating her and revenge against Minerva for our actions. An order is given from the planet's head council saying to kill anyone that impersonates Lacus Clan. Because the whole crew believes that Mir is the real Lacus, the Minerva prepares to attack the Eternal and Kusanagi. At first, Talia is hesitant and is worried about the orders given, but Shin vehemently chooses to carry out the order without question, saying that he will defeat all the enemies that lie ahead of him, and that if they live, their existence can also cause confusion similar to the Archangel's blatant terrorism of showing up, interrupting battles. During the battle, a surprise attack from a squad of Gin high maneuver types ambushes the Minerva, despite being allied with Zaf. After disposing the squad of Gins and getting rid of the real Lacus, the Minerva awaits a response from Planet's headquarters concerning the squad of Gin that had attacked them without cause. Strangely enough, headquarters' only response to them was simply head out towards the Alliance's moon base where the final battle will take place. There is no mention of the actions made by the Gin squad, which leads Talia to have suspicions about Zaf and Durandal as a whole. This stage also has a unique enemy in the form of Rei piloting the Destiny Gundam instead of Shin. Rei's squad deploys in order to put down both the remaining Alliance forces and the Minerva. Rei claims that the Minerva is now useless to Durandal's plan and are considered traitors to the plants as a whole. The ending then goes as described. After clearing the stage, the the Minerva escapes the siege. Durandal and Jibril both return to their respective home countries for the time being. The war reaches a stalemate, with both sides losing its ace in the hole. The Earth Alliance were not able to deploy the nuclear missiles, and their squad of destroy Gundams have been dwindled due to the efforts of both Zaf and the Minerva. On the other hand, Zaf did not expect to lose their trump card, the Destiny Gundam, due to it being destroyed by the players' efforts. Because of this, both sides were in a constant stalemate. Jibril rejects the idea of peace, and it's suggested that the war continues in order to break the staggering stalemate of both forces. The two sides then continue fighting towards CE-74, as they simply cannot find any way to resolve their issues through dialogue. The fate of the Minerva and his crew remains unknown, but it is said that the ship disappears from the face of history, never to take center stage again. Alright, wow. Holy shit. Almost all of those endings from that game were depressing as hell. You know, despite being released with original endings to the anime before episode 50, there's quite a lot of elements from this game that can be seen in the final product of the anime. I mean, Rei is still being a loyalist, Durandal's radical actions towards those who oppose him, and even the final battle shares a lot of parallels to the anime's final battle version. Although, you know, in my opinion, the portrayal of Shin in this game is a bit different from that of the anime. I mean, if you guys go back to my previous video when I was talking about my Shin Asuka breakdown, I said that like in the last few episodes he was just confused and he just wanted things like to end. I mean, sure, he was angry, but in this game he's like in a different level of angry. Like, holy shit, man, this dude is just super violent from what I've seen from the gameplay, like the dialogue. It's like the portrayal of him was just like, you know, he's more angrier, you know. Anyways, so going back on those claims of if the endings were supposed to be, you know, real or not, what I can say is that from my research, I've noticed that in this era, Bandai started to push out and rush out their games to coincide with their shows while the iron's still hot. For example, in 2002's Kamen Rider Ryuki PS1 title, some of the characters were not finalized yet, and as such is depicted to have a different personality than the one seen in the show. Of course, that game also released a couple weeks before it ended. Another example of a game that I actually have played as well is 2006 Comrade Kabuto. One of the secret unlockable characters has a different characterization from the show. What I'm trying to say is that these games are, in a way, very similar to Generation of Cosmic Era. The products were rushed out while their respective shows were still in production and have not properly concluded yet. It is very possible that these many elements seen in these 6 endings of Generation of CE could have been just ideas for what originally could have been the original true ending to the series. Although I like to just believe that Bandai was giving a prototype script of sorts before production ultimately changed the ending for the anime at the last minute. Personally, I like to believe that ending 2 seems to be the most plausible and logical one, worthy of being the true ending. I mean, it has a lot of elements as the one we see in a special edition ending, my bad, where like they sign a peace treaty and Lycus becomes a chairwoman of ZAF. That one, you know, ending 6 also seems to be super unique to me as well. I mean, like, it foreshadows Rei's role and Durandal's behavior of the last episodes or so. I mean, this game was released like, I think like 5 or 4 weeks before the final episode, so it could have been like quite a treat for those who were playing the game while the anime was coming out. And I mean, the ending is pretty bleak, but I always kind of find it unique that like the fate of the Minerva's crew is left ambiguous, but it's heavily implied, at least to me, that they were just gone or they were dead or something. Alright, to end off this video, you know, I just thought it was just a little fun thing to do, just look back at the alternate endings of what Seed Destiny could have been, you know, with Seed Freedom coming out next month. It's quite ironic knowing that, you know, the fate of the Earth and plants is always screwed or doomed no matter what happens. I mean, with Seed Freedom coming out, we already know that there's always going to be new conflict. It is the theme of Gundam after all. Anyways, yeah, I kind of timed this video around the time when the new leaks just came out. With Shin supposedly having a new Destiny Gundam. That seems pretty cool. And guess what? In this video, talking about like the alternate endings of Seed Destiny, so it was kind of ironic that two things were just tied together, back to back. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what y'all think. What ending do you guys prefer and all that. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.